Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage. Probably the most confusing part of Medicare is Part D prescription drug coverage. Today we'll take you through the 4 phases of Part D and how they impact the price of your medications. Also, we'll show you how to get insulin for no more than $35. Today's video is about the 2022 Part D drug coverage phases. Whether you have a standalone Part D drug plan or a Medicare Advantage plan, they have to follow the same guidelines. Let's take a look. Here's a visual description of the 4 phases of Part D prescription drug coverage. It's a lot to look at, so let's take one phase at a time. Deductible. Every January 1st the deductible resets. Medicare set the maximum Part D plan deductible in 2022 at $480. Remember, a deductible is what you owe before the insurance carrier helps, so if your plan has a deductible you will owe the full cost of the applicable drugs until you meet the deductible. I say applicable drugs because not all drugs will necessarily be subject to the deductible. Some plans will have a $480 deductible on all drug tiers. Others only have a deductible on brand name tires, and there are even some plans with no deductible. Next up is the initial coverage phase. Assuming your medications are covered on the plan's formulary list of drugs, this is when your Part D plan begins to pay the bulk of a drug's cost. It's tier-based pricing. Typically generic drugs are Tier 1 or Tier 2, and then brand name drugs are Tier 3, Tier 4 and Tier 5. You will pay a copay or co-insurance percentage until you reach $4,430 of total gross drug costs. Gross costs are what the drugs actually cost, not just your portion of the cost. So if a drug's full retail cost is $100, but you only have a $30 copay, the full $100 are applied toward reaching the $4,430 amount, which gets you into the next phase of Part D. The coverage gap is also known as the donut hole. If you have a very expensive drug, then you can reach the donut hole very quickly. When Part D first began in 2006, reaching the donut hole was very undesirable as you owed $100 of a drug's cost. In 2022 it's not nearly as bad. You might have heard that the donut hole is now officially closed since 2020, but that doesn't mean everything is free. Rather, you're still required to pay $25 of a drug's full retail gross cost in this phase. For some drugs like generics, the cost might not change much. For other drugs like brand name and specialty drugs, the cost could go up substantially because you're now paying 25% of the full gross cost. It's like this until you reach $7,050 of true out-of-pocket costs, or TROOP. Catastrophic is the final phase. When your true out-of-pocket costs reach $7,050, you're in the catastrophic phase. Here, for the remainder of the year you will pay the higher of 3.95 cents for generics, 9.85 cents for other drugs, or 5% of a drug's full gross cost, but you don't actually have to pay $7,050 out of your pocket. Most people, when seeing that number, think they'll never reach that much in drug costs, but it's easier to get to the catastrophic phase than you think. TROOP is calculated by adding up these 4 items. Your cost in the deductible phase, your cost in the initial coverage phase, your cost in the coverage gap donut hole phase, and 70 of the brand name costs in the coverage gap donut hole phase, which the manufacturer pays on your behalf. As you can see, if you experience all 4 phases of Part D, you will potentially pay 4 different prices for your medications throughout the year, and keep in mind you would only deal with the donut hole and catastrophic phases if you take pretty expensive medications. If your prescriptions are all Tier 1 and Tier 2 generics, then your Part D coverage will be pretty straightforward. So how does this work if you take insulin? Well, 2022 is the 2nd year of the new insulin savings program. If your plan participates, your insulin is capped at a $35 copay. Here's what you need to know. Medicare created a list of approved insulins that are part of the program. In 2022 there are now more insulins to choose from, and then it's up to the insurance carrier to decide which ones they include on the plan's formulary list of drugs. If the insulin is covered in the plan, here's how much you owe. In the deductible phase, initial coverage phase. In coverage gap donut hole phase, it's all the same, a $35 max copay for a 30-day supply. In some cases, you might see your plan cover the insulin at an even lower copay, but it can't be more than $35. But the insulin savings program does not extend to the catastrophic phase. If you reach it here, you pay 5% of the full gross cost of the insulin. Depending on the full cost, 5% could be higher or lower than $35. This new program is already positively impacting Medicare beneficiaries and saving them a lot of money. Well, that's Medicare Part D. For you it's a lot of information, but just know you don't have to do this analysis on your own. That's what we're here for. Contact us anytime with questions. Please contact us at 973-590-2695 or visit our website www.abbysconsulting.net.